classifications. Don't let them move outside of that white, non-white, white supremacist. You got to be white to be a white supremacist. All right? So these are the classifications. We're not members of a race. Don't ever want to be members of one. Why? Why is it that you shouldn't say, even on a form, that you're a member of a race? One thing is not true. But why is it not true? Race is racism. Okay? So if they say that you can name your race, what do you put there? You put V.O.R. That's what I put there. Victim of racism. That way they have to ask me, what does that mean? See, when you start putting things on paper that you invent, people have to ask you what it means. That is a form of power. The white supremacists understand this. Now, I have put that on official forms. Sometimes I put B/VOR, black victim of racism.
What's been the response? What's been the response?
The response? People look at it and, okay. That's the response I've always gotten. In that block where it says race, I put B/VOR. If it's not enough space, I just put B/VR. But it means the same thing, victim of racism. Because that's who I am. And if anybody asks me about it, that's what I'll say. I'll tell them that's what it means. I'm a victim of racism. I want the whole world to know that. You know, I'm more of that than I am anything. It's not just being black. That doesn't mean anything except somebody made it mean something. And what they made it mean is that I'm supposed to be pushed around. And who did that? The people that came up with this race designation in the first place. Because we didn't know nothing about that until the white supremacists told us. We had tribes. Just like the Indians. They didn't know about no Indian race. Red race. That's why they don't particularly like that term redskin. That was put on them. You ask, who are they? They say, we are the people of the creek. That's what they call them in Oklahoma. My grandmother was one of them. Elzora Lewis. She had an English name, but she was what they call Park Creek Indian. Okay? Why? Because they were the people that lived down by the creek. That's how they got the name. They were a branch of the Cherokees. And what that means, I don't know. The term Oklahoma itself means land of the red people. Okay? So what does this race thing mean? The white supremacists thought it up when they thought of the idea of white supremacy. They are the suspects. They're the usual suspects. Nobody else has claimed that. So then they started making everybody else a member of a race. You tell them, I'm not a member of no race. When did I join? See, you got to join a race. You're not just automatically a member of a race, because in order to be a member of a race, you have to practice racism. We don't practice racism. We don't need it. The white supremacists need it, because they thought it up. And when you present that argument, it cannot be beaten. Anything that I say in here, by the way, if it's beat, if you're talking about it and somebody beats you at it, you come back and throw it on me, because it's supposed to work. Anything that they try to do with that, they're going to wind up messing themselves up. I'm saying that flat out. If they try to go any which way with that, try to get you away from it, they're going to mess themselves up in their explanation. If you say, well, why do I, just ask them questions. Why do I have to be a member of a race? Sir, ma'am, and let them tell you. They're going to start stumbling and fumbling. Watch it. Just try it. You can just try it just as an experiment, You say, I'm not a member of a race. They might say, well, aren't you African American? No. See, white, non-white, white supremacists. These are the three categories. You're not white, and you're not a white supremacist. So that leaves non-white, which means black. So just let them grapple with it. See, they made this mess. But this is the way out of it. First of all, through language, coupled with action. So first of all, we have to learn how to talk, because that's where we lose. Because we're dealing with a master of words. As the white people who believe in white supremacy, those who are really good at it will whip you to death with words. But see, we just need to know a few terms that can get us out of it. So then they'll have to talk straight to us. That's the first thing you want them to do. See, pin them into a corner where they got to talk straight. They can no longer be deceptive. And you can do it if we have to learn how to use the language.
Gene.
Shireen.
Code Switch. All right, let's get right into your interview with the author of the book, Making Hispanics. I'll just let her introduce herself.
Cristina Mora, Associate Professor of Sociology at UC Berkeley.
Welcome to Code Switch.
Thank you.
We talked to John Thompson, who was the outgoing head of the census, and people are a little bit nervous. And someone tweeted at us saying, oh, the census is drama every 10 years. There's always drama. Is that true?
The census has never been devoid of politically thorny issues. Everything from whether they're going to use the label Hispanic or Latino or Spanish origin to whether Middle Eastern, North African people are going to be distinct from whites to whether the label Negro will still be used. All of these things are politically and culturally sensitive issues. If it was only about counting people and just getting the statistical numbers right, there might be less drama. But because it's about what we call ourselves, how we see ourselves, and how that will be connected to whether we're represented or not, of course there'll be drama.
You argue in your book, Making Hispanics, that this Hispanic or Latino or what some are now calling Latinx, pan-ethnic identity in the U.S. is actually a fairly recent phenomenon, speaking of what we call ourselves. And I just have to say that I know people don't think these terms mean exactly the same thing, but they're all used to group people of the Latin American diaspora in the U.S. together. But in the 60s, you write that the three largest Latin American diaspora groups, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and Cubans, lived in different parts of the U.S. They had different needs, and there was very little appetite for an umbrella category back then. Can you tell us why they didn't want to be grouped together?
Oh, the issue was really contentious. On the one hand, you had Puerto Ricans unsure of whether an alliance with Mexican Americans would mean that their issues would be swept under the rug because Mexicans were much larger. Mexican Americans were in Texas, sometimes under Jim Crow restrictions, or in places like California where they were segregated to different schools and discriminated against. Puerto Ricans had these sort of same issues, but were also really concerned about the Puerto Rican statehood question and these questions about what are the rights that they had as citizens. And at the same time, you had these two groups then having to contend with Cubans, many of which claimed that they were white, many of which saw themselves as not necessarily completely distinct from everyday Anglo-Americans in Florida, to the extent that they were going to make demands on the state. It was to get the state to pay attention to Cuba. They were much less interested in making a demand based on minority rights. It just wasn't in their purview.
There was no Hispanic option, right, on that 1960 decennial census?
No, not at all. There had been something called the Spanish surname count. And the Spanish surname count was a count that was only done in the Southwest. You would be labeled Spanish surname if your name fell on this list that the U.S. Census Bureau had comprised of thousands of names culled from the Mexico City and the San Juan phone book. But once again, that was only if you lived in states like Texas and California, New Mexico, and Colorado.
Even though they used the San Juan phone book from San Juan, Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I guess they wanted to catch whatever Puerto Ricans could be in L.A. at that time or so.
And they tried to fix that, right, 10 years later?
Yeah, on the 1970 count, what they had was that on the long form, only select households were given these forms, and there was a question that said, are you Spanish origin? And there, people could mark off yes and then write in whatever nationality they were. They were on the road towards creating a category that would indicate some sort of umbrella pan-ethnic grouping that wasn't necessarily tied to a practice, like the practice of speaking Spanish, or to some objective factor like what your last name was.
But is it putting too fine a point on it to say that it was a total failure? That the 1970 decennial census count really upset what we're calling the Latinx community these days?
From the standpoint of the count, sure. There was a huge undercount, just as there was an undercount of African Americans and Latino community and their organizations, from the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund to Aspida and other Puerto Rican groups, took to writing to U.S. newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, assailing the U.S. Census Bureau for not adequately counting them. In part because they had this now one select question that went to only 10% of households in the United States. And even when it went out there, it wasn't in Spanish. And they hadn't really mobilized a publicity campaign to actually teach people that, hey, there's this question that's about you, that's incredibly important, that's going to be connected to political representation in all ways that we see you.
And then by 1980, the term Hispanic shows up for the first time on the census form. And I would love for you to take us into the behind-the-scenes fights that led to that.
Well, there were several. So the first fight is right after the 70 count, when Latino organizations from Los Angeles to D.C. to New York start arguing that there was a huge undercount. Mm-hmm. They get the ear, really, of the Nixon administration. And one wouldn't necessarily think of Nixon as a champion of Latino rights or Latino identity, but Nixon was open to hearing Latino concerns, in some part because Nixon had grown up in Southern California. He'd grown up in a context where he knew Mexican Americans existed, right. And they were different. Their lives were different. Their experiences were different from whites. But also, too, Nixon was a savvy political campaigner. In 1972, he created the first comprehensive Latino vote political campaigns at the presidential level that the country had ever seen.
I had no idea.
Yeah, Nixon had what he called amigo buses that roamed around the Southwest, but also the Northeast and into Florida. Mm-hmm. And on these amigo buses, those that roamed on the East Coast played salsa and cumbia, and those that roamed in the Southwest played mariachi. This was before the Democratic Party did anything close to this.
Wow.
And the Census Bureau, they're pressured by the Nixon administration to let in and create now this new advisory board comprised of the Mexicans and the Puerto Ricans that were incredibly loud, and also some Cuban sympathizers that had been big contributors to Nixon. One of the biggest points of debate is, what would this group be called? Right. Some of the Spanish origin advisory members said, hey, why not use brown? We don't fit into these white, black, Asian categories. That's not us. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a demographer, if you're a statistician, that seems like an incredible nightmare. You know, brown can mean Filipinos, brown can be Native Americans, brown can be South Asian Indians. This was a complete non-starter. It seemed like a headache more than anything. So they went down the list. Latin American. One of the problems with Latino politics is that they were seen as foreigners, that Latinos were seen as invaders and not inherently American.
Right.
And that one of their jobs was to really show that they were an American Hispanic constituency, that they were an American minority group, like African Americans, a minority that stretched from coast to coast and that were patriotic, that fought in wars, that contributed to American history, that built American cities. And so when a term like Latin American was used, right away it seemed to strike discord because it was seen as too foreign. Latino itself was closely seen as too close to Latin American and also too close to the word Latin. Mm-hmm. Hispanic was never a term that everybody loved, but it was a term that got a lot of support from within Latinos in the Nixon and later the Ford administration.
How did they make it stick?
Yeah. So the census director literally picked up two phones. He called all the Latino advocacy groups that were being set up in Washington, D.C. at that time.
What year is this?
1976, 1977.
Okay.
They picked up the phone and they called the National Council of La Raza. They called the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund and said, help. This is the category that we have. Can you help us promote it? And promote it they did. NCLR by itself set up town halls in places like Miami, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, showing people the new census form and telling them, look, we're Hispanic. This is us. This is our chance. This is our category. The second phone the census director picked up was to Spanish language media. At that time, the company that would later go on to be called Univision was growing rapidly. By 1980, they had television stations or relay stations in most major U.S. markets. They ran documentaries, commercials, even a day-long telethon where different performers from across Latin America came out. Each of them held out the census form and says, hey, remember to fill out the census. We're Hispanic on the 1980 census. This is important for us.
But we spent a lot of time talking about how Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and Cubans really wanted to be seen as distinct. And then, you have this megaphone of Univision and you have these grassroots groups out there saying, no, but we're together, we're doing this together now, and we're being called something you've never heard of before. It's Hispanic. How successful was that?
Well, certainly there wasn't as much of an undercount in 1980 as there was in 1970. The number of Latinos grew exponentially, and years later we figured out that it wasn't because people had babies, it's just because we counted them much better. All of the attention going out did bring people out to fill out the forms, for sure.
How did we get from exponential growth to me saying I'm a Latina?
Because it takes on a life of its own. Once the category was made, everything from political groups to civic organizations to every other media group that would emerge, Spanish language media group that emerged, would all use and draw on census data. As soon as the census numbers came out, Latino lobby groups could then run the numbers and say, look, this is what Latino poverty looks like. This is what Latino educational attainment looks like. And they could go up to the Department of Education, for example, and say, Latinos are the second largest minority group. And yet, look, our educational attainment pales that of whites. Send money to our schools. We demand money for these things, right? The same exact thing happened in the market. As soon as the numbers came out, Univision releases the first Hispanic marketing manual in which they take figures like income and they call it Hispanic buying power. And they take these census reports and they go and they make pitches to McDonald's and Kellogg's and everybody else, and they start to slowly grow. During the 1980s, Latino political organizations started to then demand that not only should we have a Hispanic category on the census, but we damn well should have it on birth certificates. Michigan, Georgia, Louisiana, they still categorize Latinos as whites. And there was a large political push amongst these groups with even Spanish language media writing to them and saying, look, put us down as Latinos. We're not white. We're distinct. We're different.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. This has been great fun.
Oh, my gosh. This is fascinating. I could talk to you for hours about this.
Thank you.
So what does this race thing mean? The white supremacists thought it up when they thought of the idea of white supremacy. They are the suspects. They're the usual suspects. Nobody else has claimed that.
The clip after that was an NPR interview of author Cristina Mora, who wrote the book Making Hispanics. And she breaks down the historical context. She breaks down the historical track record of the creation of the term Hispanic, the creation of the term Latino. She breaks down the social political environment that called for this term to even be brought into existence, these terms, Hispanic and Latino. And within the so-called Hispanic Latino grouping, there isn't a consensus on how this imaginary group wants to identify with itself. You have people that are from different countries that just so happen to speak Spanish that come into the borders of the United States, and they have a particular agenda and particular interests that may not align. But it is in the best interest of these Spanish speakers to group themselves together to accomplish things for the imaginary grouping. And throughout the history of the term Hispanic, throughout the history of the term Latino, there has never been a consensus within Spanish-speaking peoples, communities, on who and what and how they want to be identified. Sometimes they want to be classified as white within history. And then when it doesn't suit them, they then turn around and say, no, y'all giving out resources to people of color. Well, I no longer want the white classification. I fall under the people of color classification because I'm getting mistreated because I got color in my skin. But wait a minute, didn't you want to be classified as white? Well, yeah, I want to be classified as white because white classification gets your tangibles and access. But tangibles and access are being given out to people of color. So now I want to be a person of color. And then you have people from Cuba. They ain't want nothing to do with none of that people of color stuff. We are strictly on team white. You have people in Mexico that, yeah, we identify as white when it suits us. But when y'all start giving out tangibles to people of color, hey, logically, I want some of them tangibles too. Now, I ain't gonna vilify anybody who has the flexibility within the context of racial classification confusion in the United States to dip and dodge and give you the racial classification 5-card, 3-card Monty. This week, I'm white. Next week, I'm non-white. The following week, I'm indigenous. You understand me? Language is not a race. Latino is not a racial classification. Hispanic ain't telling me nothing about racial classification. They know that. We know that. The creators of all this confusion, the white supremacists, know that. But it is just one of the tools that is used by the people who dominate the globe to dominate non-white people. And we'll sit here and fuss and fight all day long about this, about that, while they sitting back, snickering their way to the bank. Day in, day out. Now that's either true or it's not true. Let's move on. Cristina Mora, Making Hispanics. I recommend you get that piece of literature and do your own research before you say, oh, John G don't know what he talking about. I'm 100% Mexican. Oh, John G don't know what he talking about. I'm 100% Honduran. The heck is 100%? You got all type of ethnic groups in Honduras. You got all type of ethnic groups in Mexico, Cuba. You got Chinese people. You got Japanese people. You got Filipino people. You got African people. You got foundational United States black classified. You got people from all over the world in all these countries, but people running around here talking about something. They're 100% something. Ain't no 100%. Now that's either true or it's not true. The concept of race is a man-made social construct that fits and suits those who identify themselves as white, because under the system of racism, white supremacy, there is only one race. Let me talk a little slow for you. Under the system of racism, white supremacy, there is only one race. And those are the people who classify themselves as white. You ever notice wherever you go on the planet, everybody got all these skin bleaching creams and doing whatever they could do to straighten their hair and lighten their eyes? Because the closer in proximity that you get to melanin deficiency, the better your experience on the planet will be, and that is because we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy. Everything else is mishmash, non-white. Now that's old John G talking. Now that's either true or it's not true. Let's move on.